Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to part 20 of the Satyajit Ray season. And today we're going to have a wee chat about Enemy of the People from 1989. This appears in the Criterion Eclipse set of late Ray. And also in Artificial Eyes Volume 3 DVD set of Ray. Both bare bone releases, but I would say the Criterion version is a better print and there's probably better subtitles. And the Artificial Eye is those not very good white subtitles that you used to get back in the day, and sometimes they're not that clear. This is based on Henrik Ibsen's play, which Ray, who was obviously very well read, was a big fan of and wanted to do for a long time. Written in 1882, it was actually filmed in 1978, starring Steve McQueen, bizarrely, and Bibi Andersson and Charles Durning, directed by George Schaefer. And they went for a kind of period look, whereas this is a much more modern take on it by Ray, and it's obviously set in India, strangely enough. And it's the story of a doctor played by Smita Chatterjee, the Ray regular leading actor, and he plays Dr. Gupta, a man of science who starts getting lots of cases of jaundice and other diseases in his public practice and also his private practice. And he sends away water samples and finds out that the local water is contaminated with bacteria, and that might be making people ill. And he traces it to one of the local areas, and it's the area which has the holy temple in. So people drink holy water as part of the Hindu ritual. So he wants to bring this to people's attention to stop people being sick and dying. Of course, as you can predict, this is not as straightforward as it appears. His brother is pretty much the chairman of the municipal government, and because the temple is the big tourist attraction of the area, he's not keen in telling people that the temple needs to be closed down, it needs repaired, because it will cost money. The owner of the temple is very upset. Religious leaders are upset because the accusation that holy water could be dirty or contaminated is just ridiculous. But on his side are his wife and his daughter, who works as a teaching assistant, his future son-in-law, who works in a theatre group. He thinks the editor of the local newspaper, who reports the story when he tells him the first time, the deputy editor of the paper. So as you can predict, people aren't pleased about this, and there's ramifications for him doing the right thing. There's pressure put on him by his brother not to do the right thing. In Ibsen's play, Not that I've read it, but the general gist is Ibsen was kind of more neutral to the characters, the Doctor's character, as far as does he take things too far, is he too headstrong? Whereas Ray's version, yes, the Doctor does come across as being naive and thinking that all he has to do is tell the truth and it will get sorted. So he is a little bit naive, obviously has a little bit of ego when people say, oh yeah, you're going to be a hero, and of course he quite enjoys that. But we are definitely on his side, and Ray's on his side, as we see these characters, especially the brother, who's played beautifully by another Ray regular. Apologies for not knowing his name off the top of my head. There's a great scene in the newspaper editor's office, who has promised to publish the story by the Doctor, which includes the lab report that tells of the impurities in the bacteria. And then the brother comes in and pretty much threatens the newspaper, which has a relatively low circulation, that pretty much, I'll put you out of business. And then of course Dr. Gupta turns up, and then the editor has to change his mind and say, well, I'm not printing the story now. His daughter ends up losing her job. He loses his job at the hospital, unless of course he comes out and says he was mistaken, it was all a mistake, and I shouldn't have said that holy water is bad and contaminated. There's a public talk, a public meeting that turns into a farce, as he's not really allowed to talk, and his brother's just painting him as this dubious character who is not religious himself. He hasn't been to the temple for 10 years, even though he claims to be a Hindu. And he ends up getting bricks thrown through his windows. His landlord wants his family to leave because of the kind of damage that he's done to the community, and again hurting the temple. There's graffiti outside his house claiming that he's an enemy of the people. Before things kind of take a turn at the end to perhaps suggest that things aren't quite as bleak as it seems, because it does get very bleak. Again, it's a film in typical Ray fashion that you think is going to be really dry. Again, Ray at this point in his career was using a fairly static camera. It does kind of feel like a TV movie at times rather than a cinematic experience. But you become so invested in the characters, obviously Dr. Gupta, but you're also quite enamoured by the brother's style as he kind of walks about in his English garb, smoking very thin cigars, just going about threatening people and gently persuading people to not be on the side of Dr. Gupta. It's about, the clash between science and religion. As characters say, all you have to do is drink the holy water and that'll cure all your sicknesses. The difference between tradition and the new world of science and technology. The fact that they question, whether the Doctor's actually a proper Hindu, seeing he hasn't been to the temple for 10 years, so how would he know the power of holy water? And to suggest that holy water is actually carrying disease is just a complete affront. But as you get into the characters, it just becomes a real riveting film, aided by great performances. The deputy editor of the paper's fantastic because he's always on his side, and he's disgusted by the way he's treated, so he becomes freelance and promises to send letters and interview Dr. Guppa to every Calcutta newspaper so people hear about it. And it's actually quite emotional at the end of the film, because it does seem to be really, really bleak. Chatterjee has a line in the film about what's the use in being honest, as the powers of commerce and religion, and you can't really have the truth getting in the way of making money, which is strangely enough always the case. And I think that's probably why Ibsen's play has still lasted this long and is still being performed, just because of what it's about. The price of actually being honest, the price of doing the right thing under pressure by several groups. Because essentially the water pipe has broken and mixed with the drainage pipe, and is forming polluted water. But to repair that, they would have to close the temple, dig more wells, repair the pipes, and they're not going to do that because it costs money. And you'd lose tourism and lose face. And his brother was the one that had the idea of the temple, which has turned this town into a really popular tourist spot and is making lots of money. So it's a common story, sadly, one that's obviously continues to be relevant. Again, Ray adapted the script, did the music. The music is a lot quieter than his usual films. There's not a lot of music in this one. It's all words, and like I said, it's a bit static. It's people pretty much just sitting about, but the scene at the editor's office is really nice. It has a couple of really lovely compositions, especially when the doctor realises that the paper is going to drop his story. There's nice framing of the brother in the foreground. And again, as with all his films, it's really beautifully acted, and a lot more enjoyable than perhaps you might think with the subject matter once it actually gets going, as with all Ray films, because you become invested with characters and you root for Sumitra Chatterjee's character, as you do in most of his films. So that's An Enemy of the People. Like I said, I think the Criterion print, I would say, are better than the Artificial Eye one. But they're both well worth picking up if you can actually find them, as quite a lot of Satyajit Ray films are. So thanks very much for watching. Please let me know if you've seen An Enemy of the People and what you think of it, or let me know if you've seen the Steve McQueen version, because I certainly haven't. It seems interesting that Steve McQueen would do it. And hopefully you'll join me again for part 21, which I believe will be the last part, and that will be Ray's last film, The Stranger from 1992, because I don't have Branches of the Tree from 1990, as I don't have a lot of Satyajit Ray films, sadly. Maybe one day. So thanks very much for watching. Please let me know in the comments below, as I say, whether you've seen Enemy People and what you thought of it. And hopefully you'll join me again for, as I say, the final part of our little journey, which has taken a while, through Satyajit Ray's films. This is Solomon Ronan from Solomon Ronan Films saying farewell.